Hey everybody, and welcome to this week's Maniac Monday. Pirate Chris here. So, I want to give a quick thank you to everyone who's been on my fan page, because this week, if you didn't see, that was Little Aiko's tail. This week I had reached 500 likes earlier today, and I just want to give a personal shout out and thank you to everybody. Normally I'd give a personal video for this, but instead what I did was I thanked everyone on the fan page, and then I made a challenge. So the fan page is in the about section below the video, so if you guys haven't liked the page and you're watching the YouTube channel, definitely like the page. See if you want to become part of the challenge. And I do want to also give out a personal thank you to my good friend Sam, who this weekend I saw, and she gave me an awesome Christmas gift that I may even use for a cosplay. I'm wearing them right now. They are slippers, and they are sharks. They even have tails at the back, and that is just awesome. And so yeah, this week's Maniac Monday is going to be about another trailer that had come out a week after the Star Wars trailer, the Terminator Genisys trailer. Everybody is going crazy about the Terminator. The Terminator fans and the Terminator community. Everyone in the Terminator community are going crazy about Terminator Genisys, mainly because they think it's a big FU to the face of Terminators 1 and 2. If you are a fan of Terminator, I can absolutely understand where you would come up with this idea and why you would think that. The guy who is playing John Connor, I've seen him in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and he was really good in that movie, and that was kind of post-apocalyptic, so it's kind of, and he's kind of playing the leader in that as well. There were two leaders. There was the actual leader part in that movie, who was played by, I can't think of his name right now, but the guy who plays Commissioner Gordon, Sirius Black, Gary Oldman. He was the main leader of the camp, but this the guy who's going to be playing John Connor, he was kind of like the secondary leader trying to prevent war from happening. So it's really kind of cool to see him in the full leader role in a post-apocalyptic world in Terminator as John Connor. I think he will play an amazing role because he was really good in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and I like to see that he's getting more work and playing an iconic role. The guy who's playing Kyle Reese, not sure. I did like the guy who played Reese in Salvation. He played Chekhov in the Star Trek movies, and I can't think of his name. I'm not going to try and figure out his name and look it up on my phone, because that would be easy. But I think he was a better, younger Kyle Reese, look-wise. I could see him looking kind of like a younger version of what Michael Biehn was is the original Kyle Reese in Terminator 1. However, let's see how it plays out. Sarah Connor is played by, and I don't know this actress by name at all, but she's the Dragon Lady in Game of Thrones. I haven't watched Game of Thrones. I know everyone's going to be mad at me, but I really want to see Game of Thrones. By this point, I can watch Game of Thrones. However, it's like season 3 or season 4 now. So it's like, well, I've missed everything so far, and I want to wait, see everything else. So I kind of want to either get it on DVD because I already know I'm going to like it, or go to HBO Go and watch everything and catch up. But I'm still catching up in a lot of other shows. So that should be interesting, especially since I know this actress is also in Game of Thrones, and I keep wanting to call her by the name of the original Sarah Connor, and that's not who it is. I can't think of her name. I know it begins with an L. I want to say she was the Queen of Sparta in 300. She's in Game of Thrones as well, and she played Sarah Connor in the Sarah Connor Chronicles, the show. So she kind of probably had somebody to go over and go like, well, how do you portray Sarah Connor? So she's probably got some bit of and I'm assuming she's probably a Terminator fan as well, or at least watched the other films. But she definitely, from the trailer, looks like she could portray Sarah Connor perfectly. So let me go into the details of why people are getting mad, though. The big FU to Terminators 1 and 2. essentially what happens is they send back Kyle Reese to protect Sarah Connor in Terminator 1, which is kind of like what's going on in this film, but you kind of get an idea of, I don't know how long it's going to be. It might be the first 10 minutes, might be the first 20 minutes, who knows. But it looks like there's going to be a little bit of a story about Reese during the future war before he gets sent back in time to protect Sarah Connor, which is awesome and everything. But something's different. He doesn't end up going back to protect Sarah Connor because Sarah Connor, by what we see in the trailer, picks him up to protect him, and there's already a Terminator protecting her. From what I can gather, and I think this has been mentioned on plots and everything already, but from what I can gather, a Terminator was sent back in time when Sarah Connor was a young girl to protect her, and they've been together ever since, and they knew when Kyle Reese is going to come back, because the Terminator probably was programmed to know. And then what ends up happening is, like, the first Terminator, while she goes to get Reese, her Terminator goes to destroy the first Terminator from the first movie before it could even start killing off other Sarah Connors. So, essentially, Terminator 1 and Terminator 2 don't happen. Well, the word Genisys means beginning. So, obviously, it's going to be somewhat of a reboot. However, very similar to Star Trek, Terminator has Star Trek can definitely mess with the space-time continuum, and the new Star Trek movies obviously are an alternate timeline. They pretty much say it in the movie. It's even said in the Terminator trailer. Everything's changed. So, if we look at all the other Terminator films up to this date, the very, very first Terminator film, Kyle Reese says it's just him and me, meaning the Terminator and himself, where no one else goes through, no one else gets sent back through time, no one gets to go home. There's no way back. Once you're sent through time, you can't go back to where you belong. You're stuck in the past. So, and then after they send Kyle Reese back in time, the Resistance blows it. They destroy whatever this machine is that sends people back in time. They destroy it. They blow it up. And by that point, the Resistance has already won. Killing Connor then, quote from the movie, wouldn't matter. Meaning that the war is already over. Mankind has won when Kyle Reese is sent back. That being said, Terminator 2 shouldn't happen. Because if nobody else goes home, nobody else goes through, you can't have another Terminator just appear magically with another Terminator, one to protect John Connor, one to not. And then Terminator 3 definitely shouldn't happen. Salvation takes place during the future war. That's cool. That's okay. But the other two movies between T1 and T Salvation should not happen if you're going to use Terminator 1 as the example. James Cameron wrote Terminator 1 and Terminator 2. So clearly, it's fine. It's canon, because it's the same director. He did want to make Terminator 3, but I don't know all the details of why he stopped. I was a child back then, so I didn't really keep up on it as much as now, and so many things have changed now that you're probably not going to get the full story. However, what I can definitely say is that Terminator 1 pretty much states that these other Terminator movies, minus Salvation, technically shouldn't happen. And technically Salvation shouldn't happen because in order for Salvation to happen, T1, T2, and 3 should happen. And, well, they don't, according to what I'm trying to say. So, clearly, every time a Terminator is sent back, or anybody sent back, the timeline changes. And they really touch upon this in the Sarah Connor Chronicles great, because Derek Reese, Kyle's brother, he gets sent back in time, then his girlfriend comes back in time, but he goes, when's Judgment Day in your timeline? Because he knows that every time they do something, the timeline is altered. In the timeline Derek Reese came from, there was a guy who essentially creates Skynet. Derek Reese goes back in time and kills that guy before Skynet is created. So clearly, the same guy isn't going to be alive in that time frame anymore. So he might have made a change, and then his girlfriend gets sent back from a timeline where, yes, they might have still been together, but things were different still. She never actually says the date, so we don't know if she's from the same timeline or an alternate timeline, but there are little hints and details here and there within the series that tell you it's very possible she's from a very similar but alternate timeline. So, Terminator has a ton of timelines. Every time they play with time and send somebody back, Terminator the Terminator timeline before Judgment Day is messed up somehow. The biggest thing, though, is that they can't prevent Judgment Day, because Judgment Day is inevitable, stated from T3, and I hate stating from T3, being that T3, that I can use to another video, because I am a maniac about Terminator, but I want to give, just like Star Wars, each film its own, its own video, because every single film, even those that are bad, do deserve a proper review, and my maniacness about the franchise to show why I disliked it or why it was good. So, Terminator Genisys is not a big FU to the face of T1 and T2. T1 and T2 still happen. In the new timeline that Terminator Genisys is going to be portraying, it doesn't happen. Similar to the Star Trek movies that J.J. Abrams is making, the other Star Trek films are still canon. However, somebody goes back through time. It was Romulan. I forget his name now because I'm watching Next Gen, so the amount of names in Star Trek are crazy now, especially Romulan names. But he goes back in time to try and kill Spock before Spock essentially goes through the Academy. So similar idea. Somebody does something in time, and now, everything's going on. Terminator Sarah Connor Chronicles do give an amazing idea that the future war is literally a chess game between Connor and Skynet. It is. So every time is going to be involved, it's going to be different. Even if they did a full reboot of the franchise without what they're doing in this, without rewriting the timeline, essentially, it's still that's an even bigger, I feel, a bigger FU to T1 and T2, because now it's like, well, these movies weren't good enough. Now that everything's changed, we have to reboot it and make it all pretty. But the movies were already great to begin with. We don't need all the special effects. They're classics. They're great. There's no need to remake them. Terminator Genisys is, yes, a reboot, but it's not saying that T1, T2, T3, and Terminator Salvation have not happened. They're saying this is going to happen next, and it's going to rewrite everything else from that point forward. But in order for you to get to Terminator Genisys, the other 4 movies still have to happen. So that's how the timeline goes. Without those other 4 movies, Terminator Genisys can't be Terminator Genisys. The timeline in that movie cannot exist without the other 4 movies. So yes, it is a reboot. Yes, it could be considered an FU because it's going to be rewriting and essentially saying T1 and T2 don't happen now, but only in that timeline. Before that movie, they still exist and they have to exist, otherwise Terminator Genisys cannot exist. So I understand why a lot of people are mad. It's a time thing, and a lot of people don't think that far ahead. They immediately go, well, that's a big FU to the previous movies, and I love those movies, and T2 is a great movie, T1 is a great movie. They are great movies. But if you either can go forward with the future war, which gets boring quickly because we know how it ends, or we can reboot it. But we can reboot it in a way with Terminator, since it's time, we can reboot it in a way that doesn't take away from the first movies at all. It adds to the lore, and it adds a new timeline. So I think it's going to be a fantastic movie. The trailer looks really, really good, even with Arnold in it. Arnold being back, yes, he's older, but I got to tell you, he still has that presence of a machine that will murder you. And I think that's really cool that he can still portray the character after all these years and portray it properly, because even though he showed up in Salvation, it wasn't him. They just took his face and then rendered it on another person, is essentially what they did. And so I'm really excited that Arnold is back as the Terminator, especially for a reboot. I think at least get him back, that's great. And going on a new alternate timeline starting from the beginning is really cool, because now we're not we can go forward before Judgment Day, see what else we can play with, and it should be really good. So that's this week's Maniac Monday. Next week I will be doing another one. Don't know what I'm going to do yet. I'm going to leave it for a surprise for you guys. The question, though, for the Maniacs out there is, what's your favorite color? It's really, really simple for right now, but I just want to get more interaction before I start giving the shout-outs and then ask some really awesome questions. So once I've got the interactions going, then we'll go. from there. But from here on out, you can post your comments below, your answers to the what's your favorite color. The fan page will be below, and I hope you guys all enjoy it. And I hope you all see Terminator Genisys. Even if you think it's going to be bad, take a look at it. It may be really awesome. The alternate timeline might just be something you like. So definitely keep it in mind. And if you haven't seen it, definitely look up the trailer for Terminator 5 or Terminator Genisys. And you all have a great week now. Bye.